And where I think the vast majority of us get off track is we're like, I'm going to get in shape. It's January 1st. I'm going to start exercising an hour a day or 30 minutes a day, right? And we're like, great for 2 weeks. And then you get sick, and then there's a crisis at work or at home, and then you get off track, right? And so you miss a week, and then you go and beat yourself up.
Welcome to the Her First podcast, a platform to help online business owners, coaches, and creators gain the confidence needed to build a successful business while creating a sustainable lifestyle balance. We are here to help you prioritize yourself in business and life. I'm Joanna Newton.
And I'm Michelle Puolani. In this podcast, along with the Her First Collective, you can engage in the challenges women face in business, ways to increase your impact or income online, and how to make it all work while launching, scaling, or maintaining. Spoiler, it's not about perfectionism, hustling, or a copy-paste methodology. Let's dive in.
Today's episode features a Her First podcast regular, Dr. Diane Gehart, founder of Therapy That Works. Diane has worked with nearly 250,000 clients as a therapist or supervisor and put that knowledge of professional training into over 12 books. She's also the only person to write a leading textbook in both counseling and family therapy theories. In our last episode with Diane, we talked all about her experience giving a TED Talk, and today we're going to talk about her TED Talk topic, because that I decided to say I was going to say TED Talk topic, which is fun to say. Welcome back, Diane.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm just thrilled to be here.
Now, for us, we just finished up talking about your TED Talk. But for our listeners, it's been a couple of weeks since they heard about that. But we are talking all about what Diane talked about on the TED Talk stage. We will link the whole talk below in the show notes. But today we are talking about micro habits. I know in your TED Talk, I read most of it. You brought up a really interesting statistic right at the beginning. And I'd love you to share that with our listeners.
According to the World Health Organization, at any given moment, 13% of the world's population is experiencing a mental health issue. And there's also been a 13% rise in mental health issues worldwide over the past decade. So that's that unlucky number 13 that I start the talk off with.
Yeah, unlucky number 13. And that, when I read that, that was so interesting because, if you're experiencing issues with your mental health, it's really easy to feel alone, right? We tend to, as humans, put on our best face, right? We're posting the best moments on social media. We're showing up to events all put together and taken care of. We show up to work like everything's fine. But you never really know what someone is experiencing behind the scenes, right? When they're home, when they're alone, when they're with their closest families, you never really know what's going on. And there are more people struggling with their mental health than you probably think.
Yeah, it's 1 billion people on the planet at any given moment. 1 billion people.
Wow. I know you're passionate about this, but you talk in your TED Talk about the fact that our current mental health system is failing us right now, right? We're not getting the support that we need. Why is that happening?
There are a lot of reasons. And it's, I do really believe that mental health professionals are absolutely giving it their all. They're doing their best. It is tough work. But there are a variety of reasons that I talk about in the talk. And the first one is that mental health itself has become very fragmented. There are over 500 different therapeutic approaches. So how is any mental health professional supposed to get better? Formally trained in more than a couple of those. It's extremely rare. It costs thousands of dollars to be properly trained in one of those, okay? And it's a relatively low-income profession given the level of training you need to get it, because you need a doctorate or a master's degree, and then to maintain it, 10% of everything you make goes into just getting more training, maintaining everything, your license and such. So it's impossible for clinicians to feel caught up. And then if you're a client looking for the right therapist, it's like, wow, I liken it to looking for a needle in a haystack. It's really hard to find the right clinician. So that's one of the biggest things um, that I see wrong with our system is it's been too fragmented in terms of how we train, and so it's not working for clients. It's not working for therapists. So, another big piece of it is that we are just now being able to start making connections in a meaningful way between the physical body and physical conditions that actually either exacerbate or actually cause mental health, but appear to be mental health issues and not physical health issues. And we don't even have a professional that, you can reliably go to who can actually diagnose whether your mental health, let's say anxiety is a good example, whether that's more mental or physiological or a combination of both. That doesn't actually really exist. And another huge problem we have in mental health is that we are decades behind taking the research that we have and putting it into practice with everyday clinicians. And we're much slower, decades slower than physical health in doing that in mental health. And then, of course, you just have social media where, social media, if you're not licensed, you can say whatever you want to. Licensed people can't do that. We don't get away with it. So I have to train my students, you have to have, peer-reviewed research, clinical trial behind any advice you give. But yet, if you're not licensed, you can go on, YouTube or Instagram and just spout out whatever worked for you. And because the listener or the viewer has a connection, a relationship with that person, you trust them. It's a case study of one, right? Which means nothing in the professional mental health world. But it's so captivating. Those personal success stories really captivate us. We get pulled in and we're going to try it, whether or not there's any evidence that that's going to work for you.
Yeah. And I know today we're talking about micro habits and mental health, but you bring up a really interesting point about this like holistic view of wellness, right? Like when you think just about mental health and understanding the connection between the physical and the mental, like I've really experienced this in just like the medical health world because I deal with a chronic illness and it's so hard to figure out and treat because there's so many factors going on and there's different there's different specialists and different
Yes.
things and they all have their own way of treating it. Right? Like technically I work with a hematologist, but because I have a blood disorder, but it's also like an immune issue and we're not solving anything.
Yeah, absolutely. And that happens all the time. I think even more so in mental health when you're talking about anxiety or depression. So yeah, it's I think it's a huge issue, both in physical health. I've experienced it too with my own personal health issues and family's health issues, but also with mental health, it's like the Wild West out there.
Yeah. So we know we have a problem. We know that, people we have a mental health kind of crisis on our hands, right? Like people are experiencing mental health issues. The system isn't quite set up, even though there's amazing practitioners out there and amazing therapists and people in this space that are doing amazing work. The system as a whole isn't really set up to help us, really move forward. So what's the solution?
Well, I offer a twofold solution in my talk. And so, one part is fixing mental health and how we train people. And the other part is empowering everyone with simple evidence-based strategies. Wow, my talk is coming right back to me.
You're just going to get the whole talk.
It doesn't leave your psyche once you do one of these. But to give everyone, there are simple evidence-based strategies that really do lay a non-negotiable. Everyone must have these, habits for healthy living. And the research is just so strong in this area. So the second, actually half of the actual time of my talk, I talk about what the everyday person can do to boost their mental health for lifelong wellness, because I'm here for lifelong wellness, not just treating this current depression or anxiety. There really is, simple things everyone should be doing, needs to be doing if you want to be mentally healthy for the rest of your life.
I know I've been reading Joe Dispenza's Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. Really made me think about my habits and my like automated responses of things. And some of those things are good for, like, some of those automatic habits are really, really good for me. And some of them aren't so great for me. Right. And I think about the muscle memory habit I have of when I pick up my phone. Like, I pick up my cell phone and I immediately check the notifications, the view counts of every social platform I'm on. And because of the work that I do, it's a lot of social platforms. My daughter has a YouTube channel. I have a podcast. My company has a YouTube channel. I work on YouTube channels for clients. I have my own personal, it's a lot. So I get on my phone and I check everything. And why?
Wow.
So, it might take me 5-10 minutes to do, but then I do that multiple times throughout the day.
Wow.
I don't need that in my life. I could get a lot. I could check them all once a day, right? I could check them all once a day and it would make zero difference to the outcome of those channels. And so I've been thinking, I'm glad that we're having this conversation because I've been thinking about sort of some of my negative habits and how to break them and how to replace them with better habits that actually bring more joy, more wellness, more sanity to my life. So I know in your talk, you talked about the 5 pillars of wellness. And I think I actually remember when we had you on the first time, we hinted at this and we were like, we have to talk about all 5 pillars on our next time we have you. Can you share what those are?
Yes. And so the 5 pillars of wellness, it's something I've developed, and it just really summarizes massive amounts of decades of research. And none of these are going to shock you. Okay. Nothing is shocking here. So the first pillar is, eating a balanced, healthy diet, made up of mostly whole foods, 80 to 90% of the time. No one's shocked here, right? The second is getting regular exercise. In the United States, we talk about 150 minutes is a general recommendation, ideally outdoors, because there's a lot of great research behind that. The third one is getting high quality, regular sleep. Not shocking either. The fourth is to cultivate a set of supportive relationships and communities. And the research behind supportive relationships and communities is really stunning, both in terms of what it does for our mental health, our physical health, longevity. It cannot be overstated. And I think at this time in history, especially coming out of the pandemic, many people's social networks are very fragmented. There are a lot more people cutting off family members and such. And so it's really more important than ever to be looking at that. And then the last pillar is what I call healthy coping. So this is having a real concrete set of coping strategies for stress that involve more than just a margarita on the beach. So it's like meditation, journaling, having, an exercise routine that might be boosting your mental health, but having real concrete things you do besides reach for substances, when you're having a really tough day or going into denial. Some people just like to go into denial and, binge watch something or go on their social media and get numb. So, we need healthy coping that actually helps you process the stress.
I love that so many of those things, well, actually, technically, all of those things are basically free. Well,
Yeah.
like eating whole, healthy foods. Yes, you have to buy the food, but you're buying food anyway, right? So
Yeah.
replacing, your less great eating habits with whole health, whole foods that are going to promote your body, your growth, your well-being is free. Sleeping more,
Yeah.
that actually probably saves you money, right? Because you're not going out
That's
all night
right.
doing things you shouldn't do. You know,
Love it.
getting outside, like you can go for a walk. You can get physical activity by going outside. You don't have to have a fancy gym membership or anything like that. You can
Mm-mm.
work out outside, at home, building relationships. Again, doesn't cost money.
Yeah.
Developing, yeah, maybe you got to buy a journal or a book about meditation so you can learn about it. But none of those are super fancy, super expensive, hard to start. And I think a lot of times when people aren't well, we look to big solutions. We want that like magic wand that is going to fix everything for us when there are habits we can make of our own that are going to increase wellness for us.
That is such a great point. Because, yeah, all of this is simple, it is very low cost or free. But the real challenge is getting yourself to do it.
Say you have a bad coping strategy, something bad happens to you and you push yourself into work, right? So you have a bad experience, you're unhappy, and you're like I'm just going to like check all my work email and answer all my work email, right? When you have a bad coping strategy that kind of makes you feel good, it's really easy to just do that. So how would you recommend someone start to develop habits that are going to help their wellness?
Yeah, and I've been helping people change for over 30 years. I've been a, therapist all this time. And what I have learned after helping tens of thousands of people try to change is that you have to keep it small. And where I think the vast majority of us get off track is we're like, I'm going to get in shape. It's January 1st. I'm going to start exercising an hour a day or 30 minutes a day, right? And we're like, great for 2 weeks. And then you get sick, and then there's a crisis at work or at home, and then you get off track, right? And so you miss a week, and then you go and beat yourself up, and then you like don't have the motivation. You can't get back into the rhythm. I mean, you just look at the statistics with, New Year's resolutions, and the vast majority of people set a, resolution and have given up by the end of January. So that is where this concept of micro habits come in. And so micro habits are tiny versions of the bigger goal. And the reason micro habits work so well is that they shut out and shut down the inner critic. And so when you shut down that, inner critic, you're able to keep momentum moving forward. You're able to keep going, keep building on it. And it really is, it blows me away at how well these micro habits work.
Give me an example of a small micro habit that someone could do to help themselves move in a better direction.
So your typical micro habit is going to be 1 to 5 minutes of the larger goal. So let's say your goal was to exercise for 30, 45, 60 minutes a day, 5 days a week, follow the national standards, get back into shape. And so, it's fine, I guess, if you want to try to go for the 30 minutes. But what I tell people to do is just start by scheduling 5 minutes a day. I have them anchor it to something they're already doing, like their morning coffee. And just start with 5 minutes a day. And if you feel like doing more, that's great. But just set a timer and do 5 minutes a day. And so that could be, and with the lowest, I want that micro habit to be on your worst day with no energy, no motivation. What can you still get yourself to do? What's the one thing you can get yourself to do? So my favorite thing to do is most of us have a cup of, coffee or tea in the morning. It takes about 5 minutes for it to boil, right? And so I just say, take those 5 minutes and do counter push-ups and counter exercises, or sit down and journal for 5 minutes, or you can even work on your finances for 5 minutes, right? Go in, balance your checkbook, or look at your credit card statement, whatever. You take 5 minutes while the tea water or coffee is boiling and do 5 minutes towards your goal. You could be working on your TED Talk. You could be writing a book. I speed write my book. So I call it speed writing, 5 minutes, working on my book, go on with the rest of my day. And so that creates this incredible momentum. And the days where you have more, you can do more. And the days when you have less, I really push because I use this both with my therapy, the therapists and professionals who are in my my training courses where I teach them how to use micro habits with their clients. I have them do it on themselves to improve their own lives. I do this with my clients. I also have something called the placeholder goal, which is, so 5 minutes was your goal. You're having a really bad day. Like you didn't sleep last night. You're fighting with your partner or your kids or whatever. You're just kind of in a dark place. I want you to do 30 to 60 seconds of whatever it is. And in my TED Talk, I share the story of this client I had who is really struggling with very severe depression. And I had, we'd done the 5 minutes of exercise goal, and we had the, do the placeholder, and they went ahead and they got one counter push-up done while the coffee was boiling. And what happened was they had this huge insight. And when they did that one counter push-up, they just really connected with this sense of strength and a sense of self they hadn't experienced in a long time. So no, the one counter push-up did not get them totally into shape, but it was this huge aha moment, this huge just insight that enabled them to make major life changes that they hadn't been able to make with all this standard treatment and medication. There is something in keeping a promise to yourself, that level of integrity, that just ignites something in us that is incredibly powerful. And I've seen this happen with numerous professionals as well as my own clients, in terms of what that does to keep that promise to yourself, keep the momentum going, quiet that inner critic, and truly miracles happen down the road.
It's so true. Those little steps can transform your life. For me, my 2023 was really, really tough in a lot of ways. I started the year doing 2 full-time jobs. I quit my full-time job to run my business full-time, which was a transition, a financial transition, stress, life, how do I figure that out transition. But all in that all time, found out that I have a chronic illness, right? So I discovered we weren't sure if it was chronic when I discovered it in January, but, never went away, therefore now chronic. And that was a lot. And, it made me honestly, I was on prednisone at points because I needed to be.
Yeah.
That kind of makes you gain weight, feel certain ways, have mood fluctuations. I gained weight. If I tried to lose weight, it would affect my labs that I needed, that I was trying to improve. It was a whole thing. So honestly, a big part of me just gave up when it came to my physical, my weight, my exercise, all of those things. I was just kind of I'm gonna fuck it.
Yeah.
If I can't be well, I'm gonna just eat and not exercise. And it's not like I was lazy. I worked. I did all of those things, but I wasn't doing the things I needed that were right for my body, right? And medicine wasn't working to make me feel better. And I just, towards the end of the year, hit this point, was I can't live, this isn't good for me. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
If I can't fix this chronic illness, maybe I can still feel better, right? And I started super small, one thing at a time, and the first thing I did for my physical health was my Christmas present to myself was a standing desk and a walking pad. And I said, woohoo. I said, I'm going to walk on the walking pad. And it wasn't for 5 minutes, but it was I'm going to walk on the walking pad while I answer my emails in the morning. I answer emails every morning. So I said, I'm going to catch up on my email and walk on the walking pad. That one change led to so many other changes. I feel better. I lost the prednisone weight. Not that weight is the biggest indicator, right? But I wasn't happy, where I was.
Mm-hmm.
And it led to me doing better things for myself, for my mental health, for my physical health. I have more energy. Even though I'm still dealing with my chronic illness, I don't have nearly as many symptoms as I was having. I feel like I can have a full life, even though I'm dealing with this other thing.
Wow, that is such a a beautiful illustration of this concept. And it's really, if you could, it's the consistency more than the length or intensity. And I think our culture gets very obsessed with super intense, like exercise in particular, or diets. We have super intense versions of those and super strict things. And, even when you see people get into mindfulness, and it's like mindfulness is not supposed to be a competition sport. But you look at America, most people kind of treat it like it's a competition sport. So we have this intensity, in many cultures, America being one of them, where it's like it's 110%, going extreme or nothing. And that is really an unhealthy and unsustainable way of approaching all of these different 5 pillars of wellness.
Because then we if your goal is too big and too unrealistic, you fail and then you give up and then you don't do it at all.
That's right. Yeah, and that's the quieting the inner critic. I have a fun story with mindfulness. When I first started practicing mindfulness, it's almost 40 years ago, people. We're not, who's counting though, right? I used to have to set a timer to like get myself to go for the full 5 minutes or 2 minutes or 3 minutes. And, because it was hard to sit down and focus for that long. And now that I've been doing this for decades, I literally have to set a timer to get myself to get up and start the rest of my day. Because otherwise I'll sit there for 30, 45 minutes, easy, just meditating because it's pleasurable. I mean, I'm enjoying it. I'm focused. I feel, and I just get into the zone, and I have to set a timer now to get me to go up. So obviously if I tried to meditate for 45 minutes in the beginning, that would have been torture and I would have given up. But if you keep up with these things, I now meditate every day and I exercise every single morning unless I have to be at work early. And I don't think about it. It takes zero effort. It is just part of my routine, and it feels very weird if I don't do those things. And so it's really, you have to play the long game with the 5 pillars. Mm-hmm. And it's this, in the beginning, getting myself to get up and run every morning was a ton of work and took timers and, felt like a drudgery. And now it's like, I don't feel like myself unless I do that. But it's because I've been doing it for decades, and that's the habit I've created. And if you can, where you started at the beginning, looking at our habits that we create, and when you consciously start shaping them in tiny ways, I think that's the key. Whatever habit you want to change, right? Start with 3 baby carrots, not like, throwing away half of your current diet. Just add, a few baby carrots, a few leaves of lettuce. Literally, I have a very picky eater. My youngest son's super, super picky. And, getting him to eat like 3 leaves of butter lettuce is how I started. And now he eats a full salad every night. No dressing still. He's so picky, won't put dressing. But he will eat a plate full of lettuce and greens and vegetables with no salad dressing. But we started with 3 leaves, of butter lettuce.
Yeah, I think that's so important, and I think recognizing, I think sometimes when you think about habits, you think of like healthy ones, right? Good ones for you. And you don't realize that you likely have negative habits that are keeping you from those healthy habits, right? And you were talking earlier, I think that the 5th pillar about having good, positive coping strategies. And I think a lot of us have developed negative coping strategies, right? We don't have good coping skills, but we do things to cope, whether that's, a substance or eating or distracting yourself with Netflix, distracting yourself with work. And we think, oh, I'm just coping. So that's good. You think, oh, it's good. I'm watching my Netflix because that's helping me cope with this problem. And we assume that that is good. They might actually be preventing us from, our own wellness, reaching our goals, or any of the things that we want to do in life.
Yeah. Yeah. And those are some of the hardest, habits to break. But I hate thinking of it as breaking a habit. I like thinking that using micro habits to add, just, instead of trying to break a bad habit, most of us are going to be successful more quickly if we start adding a healthy habit. So let's say you're a Netflix binger when you get stressed, or, scrolling, right? Doom scrolling, whether it's news or social media. Just adding 60 seconds of mindfulness, or 60 seconds of just journaling what emotions you felt today, or 60 seconds of gratitude journaling, right? 60 seconds, then you can do your thing.
Yeah.
But it's amazing how that 60 seconds just shifts the stream of thought, shifts the stream of behaviors, and like opens possibilities for new things that would never have been possible. And the trick is you can normally convince yourself to do 60 seconds of something before you get to have your reward, which, might be, your Netflix binge.
Yeah. And then you might find that 60 seconds, like you experienced with meditation, your 5 minutes turns into, I need to stop I have to tell myself to move on and get the things done on my list, right? Like you might get to that
Yep.
point. And that if you're not in that place, that might seem so impossible. You're probably, if you're listening, you're like, no way. But I've experienced that in my own life. You've experienced in your own life, and also your, the people who work with you as well, like experience the benefits of that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so it's starting small, and it's the consistency. So being small allows you to be consistent. And that's where like the lifelong change, the whole trajectory, shifts.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing a lot of your TED Talk with us. Is there anything else about creating micro habits that you want to share before we wrap up?
Well, I think the key really is, don't start it until you're sure you're going to commit to it. And it's a long-term commitment. This is like a long-term relationship with micro habits. And keep it simple, attach it to something you're already doing. And then slowly what you're going to find is that time will naturally want to be longer, and you can do it in that 5 minutes or move it to a different, part of your day, depending on your circumstances. But then you can start doing what we call habit stacking, where you add a couple of habits to that, right? And once you actually get good with this 5 minute block of time, or 10, 15 minutes, whatever you can carve out in the morning, once you get good at that, like you can use that for everything in your life, to build positive relationships, right? To write a book, write a TED Talk, start a business, work on your health, you can do anything. And once you have that 5 minute placeholder, you can just start switching in and out things. But once you create that, it's like your ability to achieve your life dreams really, just increases exponentially, because you can do almost anything if you just start with that 5 minute micro habit.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for what you do for the general public, for your clients. Like Diane is out there doing the work every day on YouTube, in her courses, all of those things. We will link her YouTube channel, her TED Talk, all of the things below, so you can stay connected with her and learn more from her about how to, create wellness in your life.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for tuning in. Find the link in the show notes to join us in the Her First Collective, a free Facebook group to discuss the podcast, ask questions of our guest experts, and network with a group of female entrepreneurs who value collaboration over competition.
Please subscribe, share, leave a review, and be sure to catch our next episode. What is one thing you can do today to prioritize you in business and life?